Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
All right. Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Doug Campbell with me here today. Doug is the president of Colling Media here in Phoenix. Welcome to the show, Doug.
All right, thanks so much for having me.
All right. Why don't you give us a snapshot of Colling Media, where it is right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are about 40 people serving about 40 clients all across the country. We're a mostly digital advertising agency, which has been an interesting evolution for us. We started in sort of electronic media buying, TV, radio, cable, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But we always had this weird focus on like real world measurable outcome, right? So going through the effort of putting like a different phone number on each cable station's TV commercial so we could track like cost per phone call. We're actually celebrating our 16th anniversary tomorrow. Big company thing. We're going to go drive go-karts because we're turning 16. But over those 16 years, right, digital media has grown a ton, and it has always been easier to sort of track and measure and show like, aha, you spent this much, you got this much out, like return on ad spend, cost per real acquisition.
Right.
So we started moving in that direction about, 13, 14 years ago. So now we, like I said, we service about 40 clients across the country doing things like e-commerce, lead generation, but not just trying to like generate leads, but how do we track them through into your CRM system? How do we track them to the actual outcome? Because you could generate a whole bunch of really low quality leads inexpensively. And all you're going to do is upset your salespeople because you're spending marketing dollars and they have a bunch of people that won't answer the phone. So we do a lot of programmatic advertising on the trade desk, display, video, out of home. We do a lot of paid search, Google, YouTube, those sorts of pieces, and then a whole bunch of paid social. Our main focus has been like trying to find not just novel ways to track it, but novel ways to reach people. So there's now thousands and thousands of people who advertise with the trade desk, but we are the 77th seat at the trade desk. One day about a decade or so ago, we got 2 emails back to back from Facebook. One of them saying we need to stop doing what we're doing because they think it's a violation of their terms of service. And the second email was saying, but we're about to open an advertising platform. Would you be a beta tester? So we were one of the first advertisers on Meta because we're always sort of trying to find new ways to get in front of people, right? The audience is fragmenting, so you sort of got to follow them around and then figure out how to stitch that together to show some sort of return on investment, because you got a CMO who wants to do advertising stuff and you want a CEO who really wants to see results, trying to get them on the same page.
Sure. And it's no joke when your accounts are at the whim of somebody else, right? And they can just deactivate your social accounts that you've spent years making on Facebook or wherever, right?
No. Yeah, it's always a fun challenge. So Facebook, Meta in general, is notorious for changing the rules all the time. They're like, oh, we've decided that this government regulation is going to scare us, or we're worried it could be coming, so we're going to proactively limit your ability to do this or that on the platform. Luckily, if you work with them enough, you'll end up having like an assigned rep that you can sort of talk to and be like, need some help here.
Be super valuable.
Yeah. And then we found fun ways to do extra targeting where you can bring in third-party data sets and bring those into Meta so that you can still do the kind of targeting you want to do as an advertiser to be efficient. Okay. Lots of research has shown that not only is it more efficient from an advertising perspective, but users prefer ads that are actually tailored to them, right?
Sure.
If they're into dog stuff, they don't want to see a bunch of cat ads. They want to see the dog ads. And so finding ways to deliver the right user experience has a big impact on brand and results.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit more about that. In terms of targeting, I've heard people, bigger companies have decided, we're spending so much time on social and we can't really track it. And from our numbers, it's not doing anything. And there's a lag, right? There's like a 6 to 12 month lag, and all the leads and all the stuff all of a sudden start going down, and they didn't realize that they were sending people to their website and to other places. It was working through social, right? So what are the challenges of that for social, for example? and tracking.
That's a really interesting point. We have sort of a joke around the office that if you're going to come in and be a new CMO of a Fortune 500 company and you want to look brilliant, all you need to do is turn off all the spending on the mid and upper funnel. Turn off paid social, turn off all your TV, turn off all of that stuff, because the results from there take time to come through the funnel. So you're still going to get for the next 90 days all of the results that you were going to get from it. So all of the return with none of the spend. So your ROI, your ROAS, your cost per blank is going to look amazing for about 90 days.
Right.
And then it's going to tank and nobody's going to know why. And it leads to this weird race to the bottom. So then all of a sudden, we'll go back to social, but we're only going to do lead gen. It needs to do a cost per lead. And we're going to pour all of our dollars into paid search. But if you're not respecting that customer journey, that sort of decision-making process that they go through, by the time they get to the decision point, which toothbrush am I going to buy? They've already made a decision about a different brand. Right? If you're doing good stuff on social, by the time they get to Google to go buy that thing, they're more likely to type in your brand name as opposed to just generically looking for a toothbrush. If they do just generically look at it, search for a toothbrush, Google's going to give them effectively just a pop quiz. Which of these 3 brands have you heard of? For the marketing geeks in the room, it's almost like an assisted recall test, right? They show you 3 ads, and you're more likely to click on the one where you're like, oh, I've heard of that one.
Yep.
Yes, the top one will get extra traffic because it's first and people accidentally click the first one. Yes, a good compelling headline and offer can have an impact on your click-through rate. But if you're doing good work on TV, on radio, out of
brand
home,
awareness,
social media,
public relations a lot too.
Exactly, right? You're getting your name in their heads. Then when they see 3, they might click on you even though you're in second or third position because they recognize and have some sort of relationship with your brand. So if you turn it off, you're going to look great for 3 months.
For 90 days. Okay. Thank you for that. So that's, and you mentioned Meta, but I'm sure they all have different algorithms that are changing all the time too. Is that a serious struggle?
It is. It really is. So in Google, for example, they have not just I'm going to pay for search, but they have all these different options of, hey, how do you want to tune our algorithm? Do you want to maximize conversions? Do you want to maximize conversion value? Do you want to do it manually? And so even the little changes between those 3 can be very nuanced, and it can change the rules all the time. In our office, we generally believe that if you set up a really good feedback loop so that the algorithm, the AI machine learning robots can learn what's working and what's not, that's going to lead to better outcomes. But in general, over time, Meta's algorithm gets dumb. It starts to narrow in and focus on just this one narrow set of the audience that it figured out is working. And you have to sort of find a way to break it out of its hole. Whereas Google tends to get smarter over time, right? It tends to find that niche, but then it tries to find the edges and tries to draw in more conversions.
Right.
If that conversion loop is broken, you're out of luck. But in general, get Google going really well and give it the feedback mechanisms and little tweaks, and it will continue to build. And Meta, you just got to knock it out of its own sandbox every 90 days.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. That sounds not annoying, but it sounds like a challenge. Interesting. So can you maybe give an example? So can you name one of your bigger clients and give an example of kind of the types of things you've had to change over the past few years?
Well, sure. So one example is Discount Tire. So we do a whole bunch of programmatic and social media advertising for them. And we've had to make several tweaks over the years as they look for a digital transformation and find better ways to sort of measure the outcomes of what's going on. So for example, one thing that we did with them that we won a couple awards for was they like doing billboards. They sell tires. People are in cars, right? Billboards make sense. But how do you measure the outcome of that? And what we found is if you just buy a traditional board, you're just hoping people drive by. And maybe the stores nearby have a lift. But by doing it digitally, we're able to buy boards where we know the moment that ad is live on the billboard. We know the viewing angle of that billboard, and we can sort of track which devices drive through that viewable window while it's on screen. And then we can see which of those devices show back up in store. So that now we can tie an offline impression back to either an online conversion, right? Their laptop showed up and bought tires, or their phone showed back up in store and get like a cost per store visit or return on ad spend by finding different ways to tie together data partners so that we can prove out the return on investment. Because marketers sort of know we need to be there.
Right.
But CFOs and CEOs say, well, you got to prove it to me. There's other options, right? Look at Google. Google has an amazing return on investment. Why don't we just put all the money there? And you're like, well, there's only so many people looking for me. There's only so many people looking for tires. I've got to get in front of them another way. So finding ways to prove that out.
And build brand awareness, like you said, too. It's all a bigger ecosystem.
It is. It is. One of the other interesting things that we've worked through with them over the last couple of years that's turned out to be really, really impactful for a lot of our clients is so many people want to do organic social. And you're posting and you're posting and you're posting and you put something up and it begins to fall down the feed like a lead balloon. And so the answer is, oh, that got engagement. I should post again. And pretty soon you've got like 17 interns trying to post 5 times a day to stay at the top of people's feeds. And instead, you can post it and then you can go to Meta and you can say, here's $20. And they will replace the lead in the balloon with helium and it will float to the top of the feeds and it will boost and stay in front of people. And now you can reduce the quantity of posts and focus on quality. And you can also just sort of invest a little bit in keeping it in front of people. And not only does that keep it in front of your existing audience, but you have options then to say, I also want to target friends of friends and expand on my network. Or I want to target people who I think are interested or reviewed other ads or had other interactions with me to grow that audience as opposed to just the people that follow your page. And then we got into a really interesting debate. Which ones do we boost and for how much? We started trying to pick ahead of time. This is a really good one. They're going to like this one. We should boost that one a lot. And then we would ignore another post that we're like, well, it's just a Wednesday post. We just put something out there. And what we realized was you really can't predict well which one is actually going to take off. So the answer turns out to be boost everyone just a little bit. So if I give one piece of advice to anybody out there who's struggling with organic social, reduce the quantity, start boosting and boost every single one a little tiny bit. After a while, you'll get a sense for what your standard engagement rate is, how much your audience usually reacts to your stuff. And after a day, you can go back and look and you'll find the ones where, hey, this one's working. The audience decides which one is working. And then you double down. You go back to Meta and you say, hey, boost that one again. I put 20 the first time. Let me put 50 this time. And that can scale with the size of your audience, right? If you're a small regional player or a local business, you might only be boosting $5 each time and then adding $10 if it works. But giving everyone a nudge, keeping it in front of people, and then letting the audience decide what they want to interact with, and then doubling down on the winners and moving away from the losers.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome. That's gold right there. And that's you bring up an interesting point with having like a bunch of interns making a ton of new posts all the time, constantly. It's kind of the other side of the coin of brand awareness, right? Where everybody gets numb and they just start filtering out all your stuff and not looking at it anymore. So right, got to balance that.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why it's so important to pursue new media opportunities. You don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? If you've built a brand by doing a lot of broadcast advertising, and that's the audience that knows you, and you've made the investment in getting to know you, you don't want to cut that off to chase new media because now you're going to lose the investment that you've made over there. But with that being said, ad blindness is real. And so getting ads in places where people haven't seen them before is a great way to cut through the clutter. Like, for example, Netflix, they just rolled out their ad-supported stuff. It was sort of, I think, middle last year where they announced their relationship with the Trade Desk. So we had some advertisers who were like, hey, it's early. It's a beta test. The targeting options are still kind of limited. The measurement options are still kind of limited. But we still think you need to be there because so many of these people have never seen an ad in this space. So when they see it, it's going to have an outsized impact.
Right.
Which is a dangerous trap to fall into, because if you're saying, hey, X has this, I don't want to say X because that is an advertising channel now, but this specific advertising channel has always worked this well. And I go to a new advertising channel and it works better. It's going to work better just because it's novel, right? You have to let it mature before you decide to pull the ripcord on the old one and move all the dollars to the new one. You've got to sort of let it mature a little bit because you get this sort of early mover novelty effect that's got to wear out over 3 to 6 months before you really get a sense of what's working.
Okay. More gold. Thank you very much, Doug. So you mentioned, or to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned the data analytic third-party companies that can track phones going by things and stuff. I imagine that's becoming a bigger and bigger industry all the time. I imagine there's also security and privacy rules. So it's weird. You're probably tracking devices and pings and clicks and stuff, but not knowing who it is yet. You can retarget them without violating those principles. Is this kind of the basis for that whole industry?
It's grown quite a bit over the last several years. I'm going to try to, well, I might climb up on the soapbox anyway. But anyhow, in the short run, yes, everything we try to do is in a very privacy safe way. So one example is everybody wants first party data. Everybody wants to actually target specific users. Sure. That's the form of email addresses and phone numbers. But you can't just pass those around. That's, in some cases, a violation of somebody's privacy because you're sending it to somebody where they didn't know you were going to send it to your agency or to this third party or that third party. Right. It's also a security risk because every time that data is stored or transmitted, somebody could get hacked and that could get exposed in other inappropriate ways. So what they came up with is hashing. You can take a piece of data, you can run it through a one-way algorithm where there's no way to take the output and figure out what the input was. Right. So I don't need your email address. I need the hash of your email address. Meta and Google and everybody else knows your email address, but they don't store it either. When you log into Meta, they're not storing your email address. They're just storing a hash of it. But as long as we all use the same one-way algorithm, then I can say, go for this hash. And they can say, I also see that hash. And neither of us knows the actual underlying email address. We don't need to. And that way, I could go put that on a billboard. Like if you remember the LifeLock guy who put his social on the billboard, I could take a hash of your email address and put it on a billboard, and you're not going to get any spam as a result because there's no way to work back to the underlying email address. So we do a ton of that. Okay. But overall, I do think the privacy debate has gotten a little bit out of hand. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of research that suggests that consumers and users tend to prefer advertising that is well tailored to them. Sure. They tend to prefer that. Also, it's a hedge against inflation. The marketing cost that a business spends is part of their cost of goods sold, right? If they can be more efficient with it, they're able to maintain their margins without having to raise the price. So it's a hedge against inflation to have really, really efficient marketing. So you have to ask yourself, why does everybody care? I understand there might be privacy lawyers who want to care because they might have some class action lawsuits on their hands. But whenever a bunch of people on both sides of the aisle get really excited about a particular issue, I always ask myself, like, who's benefiting, right? The old Latin quo bene, like, where's the money going here? Right. So one thing the open internet has done is allowed me to target users rather than properties. In the past, I had to say, well, I think the audience looks like this, and that audience tends to maybe watch sports. So I'm going to go to ESPN and I'm going to advertise with Disney because they own ESPN, and I'm going to show up on sports, even though maybe 50, 60% of that audience isn't my target demographic, but because a big chunk of them are. Right. Now, with modern targeting, because I'm going after specific users, it doesn't matter if they're on ESPN or if they're on a knitting blog. I can still show an ad to them. I can still interact with them. So now you have a lot of small publishers who are able to build a lifestyle, build a living off this advertising revenue. Right. You have users that are getting really well-targeted stuff, and who's losing in that game? Well, two people. One, massive data providers like the credit unions, or the credit bureaus, right? TransUnion, Equifax, they know everything about everybody. Your banks, all of them, they know what you buy. And they know from their algorithms, like, well, if you buy X, Y, and Z, you're very likely to go buy this next product. And so, and then the publishers, the people who own the inventory, the Disneys of the world, they know that you're just going to go blindly buy ESPN, even if it's inefficient, but not if you could do really good targeting based on third-party cookies, based on these data signals. So every time they limit those, I'm always worried that it's just the banks, the credit bureaus, and the publishers just sort of trying to guard their turf and go back to the way they used to make money in 1990.
Right. Sure. That which makes sense. Another great point. Thank you very much. So, of your clients, right? I imagine you don't have a million clients. You have a handful of really good clients. Who is your sort of ideal client for Colling Media?
So we really sort of carved out a space where we get excited, and whenever our team gets excited and passionate about something, it leads to better results. But the place where we get most excited is this sort of difficult to track offline conversion point. We do plenty of e-commerce. E-commerce is kind of, I don't want to say easy, but easy is the word that comes to mind because the entire transaction happens online. I see an ad, I click it, I add to cart, I check out. It's very easy to stitch that together, which means a lot of people can do it. You can set it up and then let the algorithms figure out how to optimize it. But where it gets really interesting is if you generate a lead, say for like a trade school, right? Like RSI here in town. If we generate a lead for them, that's not enough. They need to know that that turned into a student who actually started in class.
Okay.
And tying together that journey and those data points starts really with just trying to prove out the investment. What was my cost per enroll? What was my cost per start? But once you have that, tying that back so we can feed the AI, so we can tell Google and Meta and all these other platforms, hey, I don't just care about clicks, and I don't just care that they filled out the form or picked up the phone. I care that they actually toured the campus. I care that they actually enrolled in classes. I care that they actually showed up on day one for classes and that they actually graduated from those classes. And being able to pass back those data signals. We did a really interesting case study with night transportation. We do a lot with them to help recruit truck drivers. There's a massive truck driver shortage all across the country, right?
Okay,
We need
I've
to
heard
move
that.
all of these goods all over the place from factory A to factory B to these warehouses all around just to get them to retail. And what we realized was over the course of about 12 months, by setting up the right data signals, we increased their cost per lead. We decreased their number of leads, but we increased the number of hires that they got.
Right.
So their recruiters were able to have a better conversation and spend more time really working with these valuable leads.
With the right people.
So with a
the better
smaller
leads,
investment, they were able to exceed their hiring goals
Right.
by not focusing on easy to shoot for metrics, but by tying together that offline journey. So that's sort of been our niche. That works in recruiting and hiring. That works in like EDU, right? Higher education, tech and trade schools, those sorts of things. It also has an interesting impact on retail, like Discount Tire, right? Because it's not just e-commerce checkout, it's come to the store.
Okay. Okay. Before we get into your sort of your client box, you mentioned some local operators. What percentage of your clients are here are Arizona based? I know some of these are national companies you mentioned, but are Arizona based, and are you global or just national, and how much of it's Arizona focused?
So in terms of like how many of them are at least headquartered here,
Right.
I'm going to say the vast majority. I was thinking it'd be easier for me to count the out of state headquarters.
Right. Okay.
So out of like 40 some odd clients, there's probably 8, 10 that are headquartered out of state.
Okay.
And now some of them are headquartered here and have big national footprints, right? Night, Discount Tire, those sorts of things. But we do a lot in the Phoenix market. It's where we got our start, and we want to continue that, right? There's plenty of things here, right? There are big national agencies and global conglomerates that want to be out of Chicago, New York, and LA, and they want to serve the Targets of the world, and that's
Right.
great. But we know that we're large enough to handle the largest of clients, but also still small enough to provide that sort of boutique level of attention and care.
Okay.
So we do some international. We've dabbled in that occasionally. We'll have a client where we're working domestically and they want to see what can be done in other places. But generally speaking, it's local companies by and large, with sort of a regional or national footprint.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And then back to the client box then. So those are companies of a certain size or revenue that don't want they want third-party marketing help. Is there a sort of a budget, or how do you normally screen for those?
It's sort of interesting. From like our CFO's perspective, it would be better if more of our clients were spending 6 figures plus per month on advertising, right? We want $1 million advertising budget. And I understand from like just an operational efficiency, dollars in, salaries out sort of perspective, that makes a lot of sense. I get that. But just last week, I spent as much time working with Discount Tire, right? Who's opening a store or two a week across the country, as I did with a small local pest control company who is like actively trying to find their office as we help them develop a logo and a brand voice so they can just start, right?
Okay.
And it's really interesting. What I love to see is things that our team gets excited and passionate about, right? And people tend to get more excited and more passionate about exciting, fun, new challenges and problems, more so than just lather, rinse, repeat, this feels profitable.
Okay.
So if you're working with a large client, the difficult thing is, how do we continue to keep it new? How do we continue to push the envelope? How do we continue to let them to be a thought leader so they continue to grow and try new things for their own benefit, but also so our team stays super engaged, as opposed to just, well, it's a lot of money. And those smaller projects, right? Like husband and wife, we're going to start a pest control company, right? That sort of piece we can really engage with, right? You can sit across the table. You can have that sort of, we like to say business isn't B2B or B2C, it's H to H, right? That human to human connection. So we take them at all sizes, sometimes to the chagrin of our CFO. But our mission is helping people succeed through better advertising. And that's not helping Colling Media succeed. That's not helping Colling Media's clients succeed. And that's not helping Fortune 500 companies succeed. It's helping people succeed.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. And I mean, that in itself is pretty big impact. That's awesome. What sort of initiatives or plans do you have for 2025?
It sounds really cliche, but it's AI. So interestingly,
Sure.
I spent a lot of time on stages and talking to clients and sort of answering questions over the last 18, 24 months about what are we going to do with this new thing called AI. And I spent a lot of time trying to explain to people that Colling Media as an agency has been using AI for over a decade. As soon as we start passing conversion data back to Google, we're not doing it just so it can report on it. We're doing it so that a machine learning algorithm, which is the root of all AI, right? So those machine learning algorithms can learn from this input, you can expect that output, so it can do a better job of which inputs to bid on, right? Who's at what point in the journey, how should we engage with them, and help us make those real-time bidding decisions. So we've been doing that for a long time, right? But at the same time, there's so many ways that we can be more efficient. I'll give you an example. There are moments where we have people in meetings and part of their role in that meeting is just to take really copious notes and make sure we capture all the action items so we don't have any balls dropped, make sure all the trains are running on time.
Yep.
Well, now I can have an AI in there listening and taking those notes. And they're really thorough and they have action items. And then I can say to them, hey, another person's role or part of their day was spent on taking these notes, distilling it down to a recap email that we're going to send to a client saying, here's what we're working on, here's what you're working on, here's what we're looking forward to. And now I can say, hey, from these notes, these outputs, and I can train an AI bot to do that part. And we don't do it so that we can reduce overhead. We do it so that smart human beings who are good at advertising can spend less time taking notes and writing recaps and spend more time thinking about the advertising, right? We're freeing them up the same way that a CEO has an executive assistant, right? Why do they have it? So they can spend less time juggling their calendar and replying to the simple emails that can be handled elsewhere and more time thinking about the big picture of the business. So we're able to build these little custom AI robots that can be little executive assistants for all the people in the company so they can focus on higher functions, the things that we need them to do, because our clients would much rather get a robot written recap and really good marketing strategy than to get a human curated recap from a person who has no time to think about their strategy.
Okay. So you've been implementing that and you're going to continue to in 25 is kind of the point, or the answer there is to continue to optimize AI and share it, I guess, with your
ways that we can plug it in, right? So for example, we do a weekly marketing minute, right? It came as a brainchild. I spend 90 seconds in front of a green screen and I rattle off 3 headlines and tell you what they mean. And I'm not in town all the time. And the writing of the script was difficult. You got to read through hours of news headlines to find the 3 stories you want to talk about. And then you got to write into a script. And then you got to be in town to get in front of the green screen. We realized, hey, we can have an AI bot that gathers all the headlines. And then we told, hey, here's our audience. Here's who we want to talk about or talk to. Here's what we want to talk about. Here's what our clients are interested in. Here's examples of like the headlines and the script we came out with. So now I have a bot that will read all the headlines. I'm doing all the reading anytime, but it'll read the headlines and say, hey, I recommend these 5 headlines. And we'll say, hey, do 2, 3, and 5. Or, hey, do 2 and 3, but I saw a different headline over here that I'm really interested in. Let's do that one as well. And then it can spit out the script for us. So the process of putting that together went from 10 to 12 hours a week to 3 by having AI. Now, you can't have AI do all of it. That's one of the big mistakes I think people make. If I were walking by our office this morning and I saw somebody on the street and I said, hey, do you speak English really well? And they're like, yeah, I'm a native speaker. And I said, come upstairs. And I put them in front of like Adobe and said, here's 3 sentences describing the ad I want. And then I took the output and I just ran media dollars behind it. I would be fired. They probably get a pass. I set them up for failure. I would be fired as the person who hired them. Instead, I would post a job. I would check their skills. I would explain who we are, what we're doing, what the output looks like. I would give them a 1-page brief and a 15-minute question and answer session about what I want. And when they gave me the ad, I would give them feedback. And then they would make revisions. And then we would show that ad to the client and they would give us feedback and we'd make revisions. And then we would spend media dollars behind it. So we go in to ChatGPT and we type in 3 sentences and go, this is never going to work. It wouldn't work with a person either, right? Like,
good point. Very good point. Yes.
We're deliberately setting up for failure as opposed to thinking, wait a minute, where can it be a labor saver to allow us to focus on strategy?
Right. Okay. Excellent. Excellent stuff. Thank you, Doug. So, if people would like to connect with you or learn more about Colling Media, what should they do?
Callingmedia.com. We got a forum there. You can connect with us. You can always send me an email directly. I don't know if I should just drop it. Whatever. dcampbell@callingmedia.com. We're also on all the socials, right? Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So if you want to catch the Marketing Minute, you can go see it there. If you visit our website and then just start hanging out on YouTube, we'll just retarget you and you'll see it anyway. But yeah, we're also up at High Street. We're up on the 2nd floor in one of the buildings here. Just look for the directory. Just pop on by. We're here 5 days a week.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Again, thank you, Doug Campbell, for joining me today. We appreciate you sharing your story and insights into success and impact and marketing here in Phoenix.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.